My iWatch says it is now 1, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'm John Rattel, President. It's now 1 p.m. We do not have minutes from the last board meeting, so the general meeting. So we won't have that to read. So next, I'd like to introduce Maureen to talk about the treasurer's report.
Hello. This is the Treasury's report for July 2021. Our income for the month was $210. Our expenses were $1,332.04. That left us with a deficit of $1,122.04. The checking account balance as of July 23rd, 2021 was $17,707.23. We have our CD worth $3,900. Our PayPal balance is $782. Our membership is a 303. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That report was read during the board meeting and approved in seconds. So that's that. As far as announcements, there's a lot of preparation underway for the seminar coming up in a month and a half. So you'll see stuff like that out on the website, and the people who are involved in putting the presentation together are going to be very, very busy during the next month of September. Any other announcements from anyone? Yes, sir.
We're looking for volunteers, and you don't have to be in Louisville to be a volunteer.
Okay, that's right. We are looking for volunteers for the conduct of that seminar. It's a David seminar, and then you don't have to be in Louisville to do that. It'll be all on Zoom, including our speaker, for example. Any other questions or announcements? Okay, Nancy, are you on board?
I am.
Okay, it's my understanding that you are going to introduce our speakers. So do you have any other additional inputs to make?
I have a couple announcements about next month, so I'll share those.
Please.
Okay, I just want to welcome everybody today. We have a few more announcements of our program and our workshop for next month for September. So on our second Tuesday, September 14th, Stephen Morris, who's the creator of the One Step Genealogy website, he will be presenting a portfolio of genealogical search tools. His website has about 300 web-based tools, and he will be pulling some of those, not all of them, and explaining them and highlighting what they do. And then on our fourth Tuesday, September 28th, we have Candy Atkins, and we've had her in the past. She's excellent, and she will be with us to present Kentucky land records, the fundamentals of the land patent process here in Kentucky. So please go to our website, KYLGS, to either sign up for our fall seminar that John announced. That's going to be the third Saturday in September. You can register at our website, and you will also need to register for these two workshops and programs for September. So please go to KYLGS to register for those. One last announcement, our quarterly editor, Elaine Wood, asked me to make an announcement pertaining to the quarterly lines and bylines. She is fielding any contributions from members and needs those contributions sent to her by August 31st. So if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the fall quarterly, please send those to Elaine Wood. And you can find her email again at our website. If you scroll down to the bottom to About Us, it lists all our officers, and Elaine is listed as the quarterly editor. And you can send any contributions you have for the fall quarterly, and do that by August 31st. So today's presentation, we're welcoming our own members, Bill and Susan Snyder. But before we get into that, I just want you to realize that during their presentation, if you go to the bottom of your screen and on the menu bar down there is a chat icon. And if you click on the chat icon during the presentation, when you have a question or something comes to your mind that you'd like to ask them, type your questions in on the chat and we will field those and give them to Bill and Susan at the end of their presentation. We'd also like everybody to mute their audio and also turn off your video before they start their presentation today. So today's presentation by Susan and Bill Snyder is Gravestone Iconology. Is there more to learn after you read the words? Bill and Susan are going to talk about some of the more common icons and symbols that we find on cemetery tombstones that you might encounter as you're researching and what the significance is of those symbols. Let me tell you a little bit about Susan and Bill though. Susan was introduced to genealogy when she joined a family research class after moving to a new home in Virginia. She has been researching for over 40 years. She is a native of Louisville, Kentucky, and she is also a member of the National Society of Colonial Dames 17th Century. And she's been an active member of LGS for many years, serving as quarterly editor, vice president, and president. Bill Snyder has been focused on genealogy for almost 40 years also. His concentrations have been mainly in Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. He also has carried out research in German and Norwegian records. He has served as president of LGS, treasurer, and also newsletter editor. We welcome Bill and Susan Snyder.
I want to thank Nancy for her introduction, and we're glad to see some of you here in the church, as well as all those people out in Zoom land. I want to tell you that most of the photos that you'll see today, Bill and I have taken over the years. Many of them are family photos of tombstones, but we've gone through a lot of cemeteries, let me tell you, looking for those icons and symbols. We tried to find good representations of things, and most of them are interpreted as they have been over many, many years. They've been accepted. But some of those we put on our own spin to them. So you have to look at them and decide whether that's what you think it is. As a genealogist, you have to figure out for yourself. Well, hopefully you're seeing the same thing I'm seeing. How do you do this to go? Oh, okay. There we go. So as genealogists, why do we go to cemeteries? That should be a pretty simple question. We're going to look for names, dates, relationships, and locations based upon what we see on the tombstone. But what else can they tell us? Anything else that we're missing? Are you missing a piece of the puzzle? And what about all those engraving statues, icons, and symbols that are either on the stone or around the stone? Sometimes they're not actually carved on there. They might be sitting next to it. Now, the terms icon and symbols are pretty much interchangeable, and Webster's dictionary defines symbols as something that stands for or suggests something else. So you have to remember that those symbols or icons were put on there and they were chosen by someone, whether it was the deceased, preferably before that, or the family members after the person died. And you can interpret them much differently. If it was something done in the 1700s, you don't even really know what their thinking was, but you have to kind of look through that, just like you look through any kind of genealogical data. And no matter how you come up with it, it's going to give you some more insight into the person or the family. So let's start with some religious icons. And you'll notice that these are something you very often see in cemeteries. Angels are the most common symbols on any tombstones. They're considered to be God's messengers. And if you look at these three here, these are cherubs or baby angels. You see this one is engraved on the stone. This one's actually a statue placed on top of the gravestone. And this one is actually the marker itself. Most often you're going to see these cherubs on babies or small children's graves. You can also find angels that look like this, and you'll notice these three here. I assume you're seeing them. Are you seeing the mouse? Okay. Well, okay. The
Did they go there?
no. Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to see if you were seeing the mouse. So I won't point to them because you're not seeing the mouse anyway. We'll talk about the two top ones and the one on the left. You notice that they're rather downcast. They're mourning, they're grieving. But you also see the one on the right bottom. That one is pointing upward. Some of the angels or statues are leading the way to heaven. They're rejoicing because you've overcome death. Now here we have an example of the top one is candles, and you notice that they are lit, and the candles mark the allotted time on earth. And if they're the burning flame, that signals eternal life. The one at the bottom, the long one, has Christ on the left and the Blessed Mother on the right. I would say that this is probably a Catholic family, and also that they showed a devotion to these particular figures. The one on the right, you'll see the Alpha and the Omega. That's another name for Jesus. It also means the beginning and the end of a person's life. And how many crosses do you see in a cemetery? Quite a few, and so many of them are different. This one here on the left is a cross and a crown that indicates victory with Christ over death. The one in the center has a palm and a wreath on it. That's also an indication of victory, because if you think about, say, the older Olympic Games, the people that were victorious received a crown, usually of laurel or something like that. The one at the top on the right has a cross with a rosary. This is another Catholic family because of the rosary. That would be indicative. And I know this is true because this is my grandparents. The one at the bottom, and it's a little bit harder to see, but that's a cross and an anchor. The anchor is a very old Christian symbol. It's a sign of hope, steadfastness. There are crosses that are made to look like trees or branches. You see the two at the top, that's what they are. The one on the right has a lily, and you know that lilies are often found at funerals. The other one has a drape over it, a sign of mourning. The one at the bottom kind of looks like an elaborate dollar sign, and that's not really a dollar sign. It's the letters IHS intertwined. Many times you will see these letters separated so you can read them, but if you encounter something like this, it is the same thing. And those three letters are the first three Greek letters of the name Jesus, iota, eta, sigma. Here we have Celtic crosses. The Celtic cross has a circle surrounding the four legs of the cross. And you'll see that that one is a whole one on the left. The other one is part of the tombstone itself. And the one at the bottom, this is a Donegal Celtic cross. The legs are all the same size. And if you see these, chances are you're talking Irish descent. The one on the left has the name Callahan on it. The one at the top has O'Hearn. So those are probably Irish ancestors if they belong to you. This is an interesting one. This is a botany cross. If you see the three balls are something like the three points on the cross like this, usually it was representative of the Trinity, and it's a heraldic cross. There are also Jewish symbols. The top one is the Star of David, which is the most common of the Jewish symbols. Normally they're put on male graves, but this one happens to be a woman in this case. You'll see the two interlocking triangles. The one at the bottom left, you see the Star of David in the center. Now this is a couple, and the one on the right of that is the menorah, the one with the candles, 7 candles. Those are usually found on women's graves. The one on the left is an eternal flame for eternity. Now the one down on the right side, this is an unusual one, and we didn't see this on too many graves, but it's a Hamsa. It's Hamsa. It represents the hand of God. And also that's the Hebrew word for 5, representing the 5 books of the Torah. It's also considered a sign of protection. Now here we have some very old stones. The one on the left is a winged skull or a winged death head. You'll notice the skull in the middle with the wings around it. This is a pre-1760 engraving. It's one of the first engraved stones that they found. This goes back to many Puritans used this on their graves because they didn't want anything that was religious. The wings indicate that the soul has left the body. And as religious ideas changed, it kind of, merged into the one on the right, which is a winged cherub. You'll notice that the skull is gone. Now it's just a face. It could be a human face or what they think is an angel face. But they no longer had to worry about being non-religious, so they changed it to this. Okay, now we're going to talk about some organizations. These are all fraternal organizations. They all work for benefit of others. And you'll be interested in finding some of these for sure. And if you do find any of these symbols on stones that you're interested in, you might go and do some more research to find out what did their people believe in, what did they do, and some of them, if they still exist in the area you're looking, you might even go and see if there's any records. Okay, this is the Woodmen of the World. This is a fraternal benefit society. It's a nonprofit insurance company. It was founded in 1882 by Joseph Cullen Root, and he saw all these pioneer men out there working, clearing land for their families. And he thought, well, what would happen to those families if these people die? And what's going to happen to that man? In many parts of the country where they were working, they would be buried with no stone. So he was selling this insurance to them, very inexpensive, so that his motto was that no woodman shall ever rest in an unmarked grave. So the one on the left that's in the black and white, that's one of the older stones, and they always look like a tree trunk. And you can see the circular marker on the top of it. And it's said that the logs at the bottom, there was a log for each child in the family, but we're not quite sure about that. You'll see that at the top, there's a bronze marker and also one that's engraved in the stone. And when we saw this for the first time, we hadn't paid much attention to it, but then we start seeing them everywhere. They are still in existence as far as I know today. The one at the bottom there, it looks like a shield. That is Woodmen of America, which is an offshoot of the Woodmen of the World. This is the Knights of Pythias, another fraternal organization. There's 2 different symbols that you might find. The one on the left is just a circle with KFP in it. The one on the right, down there on the left side of the stone, it's an inverted triangle, and it has the letters F, C, and B in there for fraternity, charity, and benevolence. This started in Washington, D.C. in 1864, and it's the first organization to receive a charter under an act of the U.S. Congress. And I think everybody's probably heard of the Freemasons. Well, the one on the left has the symbol with a square and a compass. You'll see that in the center. This is the male portion of the organization. And they believe that this is not a religion. A lot of people think it might be, but it's not. But they do have very high moral standards. The compass reminds the Masons to circumscribe their desires and passions within specific limits. On the right side, this is the women's part, and that's the Eastern Star on that one. There are many parts of the Masons, and this is another section of that, the Knights Templar. You'll see the one with the knight with the sword and the shield, and also at the very bottom, and they both have these same words on them, in hoc signi vinces. And that's, in this sign you will conquer. The one on the right is a very old stone, and you'll notice at the very bottom, it has a backhorn hat and a sword. And the people that are in this organization today still wear those hats and swords for certain ceremonies. And that is the only one of those that we found, that unusual one. Okay, we have two different ones here, the Benevolent and Protective Order of the Elks. This picture was taken in Cave Hill Cemetery here in Louisville with the large elk statue. And you'll notice all of these markers around it. Those are all members of the Elks. There's another statue with another stone at the bottom we found with the BPOE on it. And I know it's supposed to stand for Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks, but some people say that they are the best people on earth. Very convenient. The International Order of Oddfellows. Now, these are all fraternal organizations. They're all for helping other people. This is one that started in 1700 in England and eventually came to the United States. So this one is from Maryland in 1819. And they always ask themselves, how will I spend my life? What will I be doing to help others? And the Knights of Columbus, this is a Catholic men's organization. They also use the terms charity, unity, and fraternity in their stones sometimes. And there is a link on your handout that has many more abbreviations and telling you what organizations they belong to. So if you see other things on the stones that I did not cover, you can look those up. And I'm going to turn this over to Bill right now.
Thank you. Okay, next we got hands and books. Okay. I like this one at the top left because that's the only one we took a picture of that's in the snow. It looks pretty good today, almost 100 degrees outside. Okay, now hands, you notice on that one in the snow, they're praying hands. You see those a lot. And the one we have down here, I can't see them. If the hand's coming out of the sky, out of the clouds, it stands for God reaching down to pull the souls up into heaven. This one on the bottom left also has, what? You don't see the mouse, that's right. You see the mouse on the computer, but it doesn't show up there. Sorry about that. Okay, well, if it's got the hand pointing up to God, it means that people are ready to go up into heaven. And also the one at the bottom right is pointing up, also ready to go up into heaven. Okay, the one on the left and one on the right are holding hands. Now, the first one on the left is just standing for a parting or farewell to this life. The one on the right is from a couple, and they're showing a bond, a lifetime of eternal bond between the two of them. Okay, now I like this. Looks like a pretty good tombstone up in the top left, except that's not the way it started out. I don't know what happened to it, but it's around now. Okay, now the top two represent the books of life. The one on the left, we're assuming that's what that is. We can't guarantee it, that's what it is. And the one on the right is the actual stone in the shape of a book with the information on it about the dates and places. So those are the books of life. The one on the bottom left, you see this a lot. It has a book on the top of the stone. Most of the time, that's a Bible. You see lots of Bibles out there. One on the left is a little bit different than the top. This one on the right is a family book. And if you notice that the two people, Joseph and Marion, Sue's aunt and uncle, their information is on a book. But if you look at the bottom left of the picture, you see another book with loving parents of Joseph, Jean, and Mary. I can't read this small one here. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway. Where do they go? One more, okay. Anyway, that's part of the book that shows genealogically the family. We know they're not buried here because they're, at this point, they're still living. So that's why we call this a family book. Okay, next, military. Lots and lots of military graves out there. We'll talk about those. Okay, the one on the left has a war eagle on it and a shield. This you're going to find, if you find this stone, it normally means that it's from a Civil War officer on the U.S. Army side. Not every officer has this stone, and if you find this stone other places, it may not be that, but most of the times you see this stone, it is a U.S. Army officer from the Civil War. Now, the next one is a bronze plaque, and it's got some information on it. It's got the name, and then for genealogy people, it's got Private Company 62, Virginia Mounted Infantry, Confederate States Army, even though I keep wanting to say Confederate States of America. Excuse me. It's got the birth and death. It also has a cross on it, and this is called the Southern Cross of Honor. It's a commemorative medal established in 1899 by the United Daughters of the Confederacy to honor Confederate veterans. The Cross of Honor is also used to mark the graves of all or any Confederate veterans. This, I'll talk more about this plaque, the bronze plaque, in just a couple of minutes. Okay, next, I'm sure you've seen these all kinds of places. They're all over the world. They are the government-supplied tombstone for military people, men and women that served in wars. They're all white. They're rectangular with the carved rounded top. And if you notice on these, they have a religious symbol on them. These have top left, the cross, Christian, top right is a Star of David, and the bottom middle is a Muslim. Now, in our handout, we have a reference to a place that will show you all kind of religious symbols that they will put on there for you. Now, as far as your genealogical information, if I turn around, can they still hear me? Okay. The top left one shows that this was a U.S. Army gentleman. He served in Korea and said he cared. The one on the right says he was a major in the U.S. Army. He was an Auschwitz survivor. So that right there might give you some information that you didn't know before about your ancestry. The one in the middle, he was in the U.S. Army. He was a corporal. He earned the Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, and he served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. So again, there are a lot of genealogical information on tombstones. Okay, now this is another bronze cross, bronze plaque on the top left. These can be supplied by the Veterans Affairs as the other small emblem on the right. Now, the one on the right is about 8 inches horizontal, and they have a couple more that are smaller. Now, these are supplied by, again, the Veterans Affairs. you can get them and they get mounted onto the tombstone, like the one on the top left. Some of them are on the back of the stone. So not just for this, but anytime you look at a tombstone, don't forget to look on the back. Sometimes there are other information listed back there. To get these, they're free from the Veterans Administration, but you got to go through a cemetery office to get that. They'll help you fill the paperwork out there and they'll send it in for you. And they usually come back within 3 or 4 weeks. And then they will mount them on the tombstone or the mausoleum. The cemetery people will usually charge you a very small amount to put it on there for you. But the medallion or the plaque itself is free. Now at the bottom, this is not government. This is just one, it's a private one. And it shows the picture of the gentleman. And also it's got his birth and death. And it shows that he won the Purple Heart, which means he was injured in action. Okay, now the next one here, these are markers represented and placed there by organizations a long time ago. One on the top left says veteran of the 1812. And the other one next to it on the right is the GAR, that's the Grand Armory of the Republic. And it says 1961, 1965, which shows it's Civil War. Okay, one on the bottom left, it's got the star. It says veteran 61, 65. So then that's the Civil War with the American flag here. You assume it's flush for the North. One on the bottom right is my aunt. No, he was in the Army and he's got an emblem put in front of his marker. And this is a private marker. You can get these out on the internet or wherever you find them. And they place that there themselves. So again, it's not a government supplied icon. Okay, staying with military. Now, as you're doing genealogy, you have, like a detective, you have to do some work and you find information. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, and sometimes you don't know if it's right or wrong. Okay, this stone on the left, I don't know, but I'm assuming that this plane on there could be a military plane. So this guy could have been a military pilot, or it might be a private plane and he might have been a civilian pilot. But I'm pretty sure he was a pilot. So if you didn't know that, you got to get some more information about this gentleman to use in your genealogy data. The one on the right here, Sue talked about an anchor before. Look at the size of this anchor. And it's on a tall, about a 6 or 7 foot mausoleum. And again, the anchor stands for hope and steadfastness. Now, whether he was a sailor or not, I don't know. It doesn't say that, but I'm assuming he was. And if not, you see a lot of anchors on Christian graves. Okay, next we're going to talk about miscellaneous. Those tombstone markings and so on that don't fit in any certain area. Now, I don't think Nancy told you this before her time, so I'll blame it on her. But this presentation has tests and quizzes, and this is the first one. From the looks I'm seeing, she didn't tell you that. Well, I'm sorry, there's a quiz anyway. The question is this: if you could find on a tombstone anything you wanted that would really, really help you out genealogically, what would you want to find? What would be that fantastic tombstone that just give you the information you really wanted? Anybody here? Howard. Parents. Oops, sorry. Parents. Yeah, that would be a great one. Yeah, a lot of time they don't have parents. Yes, ma'am. Maureen?
County, township of origin for Irish ancestors.
She says county or township of Irish origin. Okay, next one. Question? Oh, we'll get to that. But what would you like to find on your tombstone? Any information you want to really find? Well, I can't see anybody's face out there. So I'm assuming y'all out on Zoom land might have some answers to this too. Well, let me tell you, since there's no right or wrong answer to this, I'm going to give
Bill,
you.
somebody just stated they'd like to see a family tree.
Hey, that would be good. A family tree. I can beat that. I'll have to hold that thought until I go one more picture. This is an actual picture of a tombstone. What do you think? Is that something you'd like to find? Whole pedigree chart. We saw that and we said, that's not, we didn't take that picture around here. We found it online. I've got to show that. That has got to be the most greatest find you could have for a genealogy person, whether you're down at the bottom or up near the top or anywhere in the middle. A lot of information. It's just like your tree. So whoever asked that tree, this would be the next best thing to it. Okay, let's go to. Okay, these are more miscellaneous ones. On the left, there's two items on this stone. One is a parrot and one is a University of Louisville cardinal. Go Cards. Who said that? Anyway, the question is this. I know what the cardinal is, but does anybody see that parrot? Does anybody know, does that refer to a college or a university? We could not find what it really meant. I don't know if this person was just into parrots, like parrots, or again, if it's from a college or university. I don't know. Anybody out in Zoom land have any idea for that? No? We'll keep looking. We'll keep looking around. Okay, the one on the top right, again, around here, you got to do 50-50. We had a U of L fan, now we got a U of K fan here. This lady is a U of K fan, and she's also a knitting person. You see that on the bottom right, the balls and the knitting needles. We know she was really into knitting because she is a friend of our daughter-in-law, and they have a big knitting club online all over the country. She wasn't very rich. She couldn't afford a tombstone, and she was here in Louisville. We didn't know that at the time. So this knitting club got together, made a collection, and they bought this stone for her and placed it on her. We had it placed out there on top of, and she's in one of the, what's the cemeteries? It's one of the cemeteries out off of Dixie Highway that anybody can be buried in. You don't have to pay for it. I can't remember the name, what you kind of call those cemeteries. But anyway, that's where, so that's another. Now the bottom right is pretty much easy to see. The green shamrocks on there. This person is probably Irish with a name like Flaherty. So again, that's another miscellaneous one there. Okay, one of my favorites here, the top left. We got a peanut and a bell. Don't know for sure. There's no book you can look up the exact answer, but here's what I think about the peanut. Either this gentleman had a big business for peanuts, he made a lot of money. He might have had a little cart and sold peanuts, he made a little money. Or he might have just been called Peanut. I knew there's some guys used to be nicknamed Peanut. So take your choice of one of those three or add your own answer to that one. The lady next to him, his wife, has a bell. She could have been called Bell as a nickname. She might have been a bell ringer or just like the bell sound or like bells. Again, this is part of the genealogy hunt for information. You have to do that. The one on the top right, the gross tombstone, has got a crest on there. So you know the family crest. If you haven't got it before this time, you can add that to your information. Bottom left, Miss Hawthorne. That's got another star on it. And just to let you know that when you see stars on tombstones, a lot of times the number of points will give you information. Like if it's 6 points, it's usually the Star of David. If it's 5 points, it could be the Eastern Star out of the we talked about before. If it's on any other number, we go from there. But these are the two most. Now the bottom right one is sort of hard to see, but if you look at it right in the middle of the front, there are two gates just barely opening up. And that is just, I don't know if they're the pearly gates, but they're gates leading these people into heaven. Okay, now here's two more. We've got the top left one, if you look closely, has a rowboat with a gentleman fishing. There's all kinds of possibilities for that one. He could have been a fisherman. He probably was, or he might be in the boat, and the rowboat is what he's using to take him to heaven. And we jump over here, the same thing could be over here. They got a sailboat for this couple. I'm sure they could have been sail people, and they enjoyed sailing. So they put that on here, and they could assume that their sailing ship is going to take them to heaven. The one on the right down here, I mean on the bottom left, the Falcos, it's hard to see, so I made the part on the bottom a little bit bigger so you can't see it. And it says soulmates forever. And if you notice, the husband and wife are holding hands, walking off into the sunset to heaven. Okay, and here's one. You see this quite often, but not overly often. It has a hole in the tombstone. I often wondered before I found out what it was, why would you put a hole? A hole is nothing. Well, that's not exactly true. It stands for eternity and a never-ending life. The bottom left, that with the candle, and next to it is an hourglass, and that stands for the passage of time. Now on the right, the tall one, you see the inverted torch. This one happens to be lit. If it's not lit, it stands for a life that was extinguished early. If it's burning like it is now, it represents an eternal life. Okay, that's what I have for you now. I'll turn it back over to Susan for the next part.
Okay, we're going to talk about some professions, languages, and urns. Didn't know there were so many different things in a cemetery, did you? Okay, we found a few here that might indicate the professions of these people. On the left top, there's a mortar and pestle, which is probably indicative that maybe this person was a pharmacist. On the right, we see the caduceus, which is a symbol of a medical person, whether a doctor or nurse, we don't know. Down in the left corner, the fleur-de-lis signifies an urbanist, and they actually wrote that on there. And if you're not familiar with that, what that is, that's an advocate of or an expert in city planning. Now, the person down in the right corner, this is a young person, died early 20s. Now that we see a music note and a little palette, an artist palette, maybe he was a musician or an artist or somebody that was very talented in those things. We don't know, but that's something that would give you a hint as to maybe what that person is doing in their life. And don't forget that cemeteries have stones with languages, and don't dismiss them just because you can't read it. The one on the left is all in German, and this is the half brother of my third great grandfather. And I did not know where they came from, but fortunately this man, even though he wrote it in German, gave it the town in Germany and what it's located to, what big city it's located to. So I went there and I found my family well back into the 1700s, just because this man was nice enough to put that information on there. And if I hadn't taken the time to translate it, I would have missed that. The one in the center is Italian, and then the one on the right is in Hebrew. Now, friends of ours have told us that the Hebrew tombstones, they will have a lot of information on there. A lot of times they not only name the person and the dates, but also the parents and where they came from. So be sure you find those. And if you can't find somebody to translate it, I'm sure if you come here, somebody might be able to help you. Okay, urns. Now, urns have been around for an awful long time. The Greeks were using urns to store the ashes of their deceased. So this is a very old symbol too. Now, the one in the center and the one on the right, those are just plain urns sitting there. The one on the very right is sitting on a partial obelisk with a drape over it. It's a sign of mourning. And then the one on the top left, that one has a cloth over the top of it. And this is indicative of the separation from earth to death. Now, the one at the bottom is kind of interesting, where you see the curtains kind of pulled back. And you think about on a stage where they pull the curtains and they want you to focus on the person that's up there, whether it's a performer or whoever it might be. This is the same idea. They want to pull those curtains back so that you can focus on the person who has left this world. And it also goes back to when people used to have the buried people laid out, and they would be in their homes, and they would decorate the doorways with the black crepe. Now we get into plants, birds, and animals, and you just can't imagine how many plants there are in cemeteries, more than we could ever begin to tell you about. But we'll get some of the more important ones, or the exciting ones, I guess. The one on the left is a weeping willow. It's a sign of mourning. But this also has an interesting story, because that's a sign that you find in the Northeast, up in New England area. Now, this woman, she was from Maine, but she died in Ohio. But apparently that was something that she felt was from where she came from. So she still had the weeping willow put on her stone. The one at the top right is a rose. Now, the rose can tell you something different about the person. It's a sign of love. And if you find one with a tight bud on it, it's usually a child, because they haven't started to bloom yet. Now, this one, the rose is kind of open. This person is in their 20s. And then if you find one that's fully open, it'll probably be an adult that's older. The last one down there at the bottom are daffodils. And this is kind of a sign of resurrection, because we think about wintertime and everything's still kind of gloomy and gray. And all of a sudden, these little things start popping out of the ground once you get a little warm weather. And those are the daffodils coming up. The top left are grapes and grape leaves. That's a sign of the Christian faith and fertility. The top right are lily of the valley. Those are purity, innocence, and humility. The bottom one are lotus, and that's a sign of spiritual rebirth and resurrection. The top one are oak leaves. Now you think about an oak, it's a strong tree. It's tall and slow growing. Well, this indicates strength, and also that the person had a relatively long life, as oak trees do. The one on the right, we've already seen. We talked about the palm and the wreath on that one. And the one at the bottom is also a, let's see, that's the laurel wreath. So that's another sign of victory. And the circle itself is a sign of eternity. We've talked a little bit about the lily already. Well, this one on the left, on the top, is a calla lily. That's an innocence, sign of innocence. It also could be reference to a marriage, if that's a couple on that stone. I do not know if it is or not. The ferns at the bottom, and the one at the bottom right below it has a fern on it also, and that's a sign of sincerity. On the top right, that one's really difficult to read, but it's the only one we found like this. This is a sheaf of wheat. It could indicate it was a farmer, or also the divine harvest that's coming up. The one at the bottom on the right-hand side is ivy. I was not able to identify the other plants, but this is a sign of friendship and immortality. This is kind of an interesting stone, because the man passed away in his early 30s, and his wife lived to be over 100. So their friendship was deep, because she never remarried after all that time. Here are some birds. On the top left, we have some doves, and we think about those as a sign of peace. But if it's Christian, sometimes it can represent the Holy Spirit. And on a Jewish grave, it is a symbol of peace. On the top right There's a cardinal on there though. This is not the U of L cardinal. This is just the bird. And that's, let's see, that's a Christian symbol. It's also saying that someone who loves you is nearby. The peacock at the bottom left, that's a beautiful stone right there. That's the beauty of the soul. And on the right is an eagle, and this is the only one of these that we saw, and it's a sign of courage. And more likely than not, it was a military person, a veteran. We have birds flying through the hole on the left one. These are the winged souls. The Egyptians used birds to represent the soul, so that's what that would be. The one at the bottom are butterflies, and butterflies are a sign of rebirth and resurrection also, because you think about the little cocoon, and all of a sudden this beautiful butterfly emerges from that like it just appeared out of nowhere. Now the one at the top, the swans, I couldn't find any reference for the meaning of a swan, but this is a family stone. It's the husband and the wife, and they talk about father and husband, mother and wife. And you notice that there's a baby swan on top of the one on the right, and then that's probably dad on the other side crowing. But it's a very sweet picture, and I just thought it was very pretty, and that's why I introduced that. And we have a few little animals here. The top ones are all lambs. There's actually the stone are the ones engraved on there. These are usually found on children or babies because it's a sign of innocence and purity. And you notice the one on the top left, that child was born and died in the same year. The one in the middle was born and died in the same day. And then the other one with the little car on it was less than 2 years old. The one down at the bottom left, now this could have been a cat person. We don't know, maybe she had a pet cat, but cats are a sign of resurrection also. So we get the thing that says the cats have 9 lives. So maybe that was what she was thinking when they put that on there. And the last one that I have, this is an interesting one too. It has a teeny tiny little turtle on there, right under her name, if you can't see it. Well, turtles represent long life. Now, she was not that elderly. She's in her late 50s, but we don't know what that meant. Maybe she had a pet turtle, something that was special to her. So those are the kind of things, they're interesting, and we will never really know what they were, but they're worth looking at. Okay, we have just a few more, and then we'll let it go to questions if anybody has any.
Okay, talked about a lot of different things. Now we're going to talk about people. Okay, see these 4 stones here? They have ladies on them. This one at the top left is holding a cross, as is the one in the top right. One on the bottom left, she's standing there with her anchor, and the one on the right is she's just sitting there. And they all look like they're grieving or mourning, but they're beautiful stones. Okay, these are more people. And the 2 on the left, the top and the bottom. Again, this is another genealogy question. You have to just make up your mind on this. I think that the 2 gentlemen on the left, whoever carved these stones, tried to make them look as good, and they may look perfect, as the gentleman that they're representing. It could just be a regular man, but I think that's what they are. They're trying to look like the gentleman it is. The stone on the top right that I keep wanting to say is a girl, and Susan said, no, it's a boy. They used to wear little skirts, and the top is not covering everything, and has their dog with them. That's a really nice statue in a stone. And the one on the bottom right has a clam shell, and so you see a lot of different scallop shells. And they usually refer to a journey through life and refer to the baptism in the church. Okay, now we got children here. Children are people too. The top left is a baby laying on a scroll with the information. You can see the information written on it. And I don't understand the stone itself, because under the scroll looks like a pile of rocks. And these were carved as part of this tombstone. So I don't know what they are for, but they're there. One at the bottom left is a young lady with a cross, waiting for her time to go to heaven. The top right are two children. Again, they're just mourning, grieving, waiting to go to heaven. The one on the right bottom, again, it's a scallop shell. It's a baby in there. And like we said before, that's just the sign of baptism in the church. Okay. Now, before we go to designs, can you read it? I just want to let you know, you've noticed that the chapters headings we've been using is a little outside cemetery. It's not a family cemetery. There's probably maybe 30 graves in this cemetery. I just used this one because I thought it looked pretty neat as far as we changed from different groups to other groups. It's in Jackson, Ohio, in Hickman Cemetery, and the stone on the right happens to be Louis and Sarah Whitledge, my great-grandparents. I just thought it made a neat change of pace going from one area to another. Okay, the designs. The top left is your basic rock with information on it. Somebody chisel out the information on that rock. There's nothing fancy about it, but it serves the purpose. The one on the right, you just look at it and you say, well, there's nothing fancy about that. And it's not, but it's something different. If you notice the writing and the numbers, they all go at a 45-degree angle. Again, that's just a different design than what you normally see. Okay, the bottom left, this is something we haven't talked about. The stone in the middle is not really an individual stone, it's a family stone. And if you know, when you get up to it, it just has the name of the family on it. And it represents a plot of where a lot of people are. If you look in the plot down here, you see two stones in the back and nothing in the front. Now that either tells you that there's nobody else buried in the front of the family plot, or if they are, they don't have stones. And you notice the lines going around the plot, those are stones, and that differentiates again the family plot, the size of it. And if you see these, don't just walk over the boundary lines to see what's on the stones, because the boundary rocks sometimes have information and dates on them. So you want to make sure if they do that you get that information. The one on the bottom right is a little unique. Sometimes we've seen husband and wife with two separate stones next to each other. Sometimes you see husband and wife on the same stone. This one is sort of in between. It's husband and wife on the same stone made to look like two stones. Okay, now back to columns. This top left is pretty fancy. It's got 4 columns and a bust of the gentleman. And it looks pretty much just like he looked in life. And if you read the top, you know who this is. Colonel Harlan Sanders, the Kentucky Chicken King. One on the right is pretty old. It's an archway for a couple. Archways just stand for the going into heaven, the way to go to heaven. The bottom one was unique in the, where are we going here? Okay. In the Victorian era, people used to use a lot of Egyptian symbolism. And that's where this one came from. But if you notice the date, it's 1903. That's not really the Victorian age. But somebody knew about that and decided they were going to use that same idea. So they put this Sphinx on here and it looks pretty cool. Okay, tree stumps. That's something you don't think about as far as a tombstone. Oh, I didn't anyway. And they're cut off to show the brevity of life. And on the stone, on the big tombstone on the left, you see where the branches were cut off. Not all of these types of tree stumps are this way, but some of them are just plain, and others have information about different family members on their name and a date maybe. And again, at the bottom, like we had, this is a family plot. You see, the individual logs are not really logs, they're stones, and they each one have a name and dates on those. So this goes way back in the back. It's a lot of family here around this plot. Top right, there's two stones on this one. The one on the left is a newer one. The one on the right is a chopped off tombstone, the tree stump. And you can just barely see on the back left part of the scroll that's on the back. I just wanted to see this tree stump itself, but that's where the information is with names and dates on the back of that stump. It probably was all washed off or faded out like they get, and they put this new stone in. One at the bottom, it just looks pretty neat. It's a stack of stone, a stack of logs. And I don't believe these refer to the number of children that people had. There's 3 people listed on this tombstone, but it's just a really neat looking tombstone. Okay, now we got top 2 up here are balls or spheres. And they're usually a symbol of the soul waiting to enter heaven, resurrection, totality of life and death. One on the bottom left looks sort of like a robot to me with arms on it. And it's got a sundial on the top. Again, that talks about the passage of time, how quickly it goes. The one on the right, I need some help with. It's a huge hand. It must be 6 feet long or wide. And if you notice in the back, there's some flowers. Somebody took one of those flowers and laid it in the palm. We don't have any idea what this means. It's somebody's tombstone. So if you got an idea why somebody would have a hand like that, let us know. Nancy, anybody out there in Zoom land have an idea?
Not yet, but give them a few minutes.
Okay. So anyway, we're talking about different designs. So that's what this one is. It's definitely a different design. Okay. Now we're back to obelisk. Okay, the one on the left is a really fancy obelisk. It's an Egyptian symbol to honor the importance of a lifetime of achievement. Just like think about the obelisks for the pharaohs, some in Rome. The Washington Monument's a good one to think about. And this one is pretty tall. And it's usually a VIP or somebody very important. The one on the right is broken off, so it's a life cut short, as in the one on the bottom. One on the left has a drape on it, and that shows again the separation of life and death. Okay, now it's time for our second quiz. This stone, which is pretty new, it's taller than I am. You can see the edging around the top just barely. That's taller than I am from when I was standing on the ground. So it's got more above it. But I want you to look at this stone closely. Okay. After you do that, the question is this. Why have I included this stone in the presentation? Say again. She said, you don't know if the lady's buried there. The date is old, the stone is, that's true. The lady may not be buried here. It could be one they put here to represent the lady, you know, could be buried somewhere else. Anybody else? Zoom land, anybody?
Well, I'm personally thinking maybe you're putting at the end just to make sure we realize how important it is to read the entire stone and get information from it.
That's true, but why are you reading the entire stone? What are you getting out of this?
Anything unusual about it?
Come on, come on. You guys look at stones enough. You look at dates and
Well,
names and-
Virginia is spelled in wrong, if that's Virginia.
Aha. Is it? Is it really spelled wrong? We think it is, but maybe the person that was buried here, or Miss Lucy Page, maybe that's the way they spelled Virginia. And so since she did that so much, whatever the story holds, maybe the family decided to put it on there like she used to say it. I don't know. Again, that's one of the genealogical questions. But that just goes to show, like everybody said, you gotta look. And what the dates and the names and places, you can't always assume it's gospel. You can't always imagine it's 100% accurate. It's a good place to start with your information. If you don't know this information, you look at it and then you got to prove your source for these. Okay. Now, last question, and then I'll let you go. All the tombstones we've looked at, I want to know what, this is an opinion, so there's no right or wrong, A or B. What do you think the most well-known tombstone in this country is? I hear Colonel Sanders from in here. The Washington Monument. Howard? The military stone? The individual one? Okay. Anybody else? Nobody else? Zimlet has an idea, an opinion?
No, nobody's posted, but I would say Abraham Lincoln, just for the heck of it.
Okay.
I think
Again,
it's the unknown soldier.
Hey, who said that?
And
And you
Good
get a
one,
gold
Ann.
star. You get a gold star.
Oh, yes.
Military think that's the most one. Again, it's an opinion only. I thought that'd be the good place to leave. We want to thank you for showing up today and listening to our presentation. Again, the handouts have a lot of places that you can look up. So instead of somebody sending you, what does an owl mean? What does this mean? What does that mean? You can look on there and you can find all kinds of representations and symbols on what they mean. So thank you again for coming today.
Well, Bill and Susan, there haven't been too many questions here posted, but there are some suggestions on some of your symbols. So to start with, I was going to start with the first one. Marcia Hicks, she made a suggestion for what the parrot might stand for.
Good, good.
She thought it might stand for the Pittsburgh Pirates, which I thought was really creative. But I hadn't associated that parrot with pirates until she mentioned that. So there's
Probably could be. Again, that's those questions you have to answer yourself and then prove or disprove it. Well, thank
Yeah, I
you.
think more and more today you do have people putting symbols of professional teams on their tombstones now. So that's kind of a new end of the 20th century icon people will be using.
Absolutely.
Linda Balmer, she wants to add something to the symbol of the swans. She said swans mate for life. So it might be symbolic of a couple who've been together their entire life.
Could very well be. That's a good idea.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Baby swan there.
And then the last one is the open palm and what that meant. That was one of those last ones Bill just showed. And
No idea what that might be.
Donna Brewster suggested it might mean it's just symbolic of the hand of God. And then Bill Butcher, he stated, well, it could symbolize life is held by the hand of God. And I kind of thought the open palm might be that you're offering up your life to God, or you're offering your soul back to God. So
We'll
I
put
don't
this
know,
in-
that one left a lot of suggestions.
Well, we got to do this presentation again a couple months over in Eastern Kentucky, so we'll add that to our notes. Thank you all very much. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I don't know. Are there any there in the church?
No, it's a pretty quiet.
It's hard to look around and see everybody in here, but I don't see too many questions.
Okay. Well, Bill and Susan, we want to thank you very much for sharing this information. It was excellent, and we appreciate you sharing it with us today. Thank you so much. And we ask everybody to check our website for next month's presentations. We'd love to have you join us for September 14th and September 28th. Thank you.